So at the moment we are in Bridge, and in Bridge I am in my content area over here, and in the content area I have selected already my image. I have given it 5 stars, and now I'm going to double click in here and it will directly take me over to my camera raw side. Now I have CS5 and CS6. If I'm going to double click on here, it will directly take me into my beta version of CS6, which I don't want. I want to work in CS5, so what I'll do is press right click on here and it takes me into CS5 camera raw. Now if you have a JPEG and it's not taking you into camera raw, there's a small hint. You can also press right click here and say open in camera raw, and it will also be opened in camera raw. Alright, so let's do that, open in camera raw, and we will directly be taken into our raw converter. So now we're going to do our first raw conversion, and in this raw conversion I mostly play a little bit with my image. As I can see, I still have played already with my image, so what I'm going to do over here, go over to the right hand side and just say camera raw defaults, and this is pretty much the normal way we shot the image out of the camera, and this is our start. Okay, so from our start what I mostly do is in my basic palettes, firstly, I actually adjust my temperature a little bit. I mostly like to have my studio work at 4500 Kelvin, which is a little bit bluer, not too warm. It always depends on what image I'm working on. Mostly for some beauty stuff, I'm working on 4500 Kelvin, and that's fine for me. Then with the rest of my players, I can see that this image is a little bit bright, so I would play a little bit with my recovery, a little bit with blacks and contrast, just to push this image a little bit. Basically what I'm doing in this raw conversion is just preparing my image a little bit and fixing a little bit everything on the exposure and contrast before taking it into Photoshop. And also I sharpen my image a lot in here. So let's do that for the moment. I'm going to go over to my sharpen area here at the top, and then what I mostly do is sharpen my images around 50 to 60% over here. I mostly zoom in a little bit and see how sharp my image is already, if it needs even more sharpness or not. Then I mostly sharpen it up to 50% here, and then I take my radius down to say 0.5 or 0.6 over there. 0.5, that's good to me, and then I already can see, okay, what's happened to my image. And if it's not too noisy, then you can also reduce, or if it's very noisy, you can reduce your noise a little bit down here. What I mostly do then, go back to my basic exposure, just want to press Command 0 here and get into my normal mode again. Alright, so we're in full screen mode over here. You can also adjust your full screen mode. Then what I mostly do also, I just play with the recovery a little bit, like I said, so I can see this image is very, very bright. I didn't want it to be that bright. We have a lot of highlights here at the top, so I'm going to take the exposure to say -16. What I mostly do with my sliders, I just go all the way, see, okay, that's what it's giving me. It looks not that nice, so I'm playing a little bit what I want to get, what effect. And I'm going to take it to 17, that's good to me. Okay, then my blacks, also going to play a little bit with that. That's way too high, so I'm going to take it to say minus or just around 15%, 14 to 15%. Okay, then next step that I'll mostly do is just play with my brightness a bit, but not too much, but I'm fine with the brightness at the moment. And then I'm also going to play with my contrast just a little bit, see what it gives me. I just want to push these blacks a little bit actually, so just a little bit, that's fine to me already. Okay, and that's almost everything I'm going to do. If it's too saturated, I've sometimes desaturated a little bit down here and then take it into Photoshop as a smart object. So as you guys can see at the moment, down here on my computer it says open object. So this means it directly takes it into Photoshop as a smart object. So how to do that? You should go down here to Adobe RGB or down here to this reading and double click on here, or just click, and it will directly take you in the workflow options. So in my workflow options I mostly work with Adobe RGB, and my depth is set to 8 bits. This is because of the video tutorial, otherwise I'll set it to 16 bits. Then my size, I mostly keep it to whatever standard it is. My resolution to 300 pixels, always sharpen for none. And now the most important part, you have to tick off this box saying open in Photoshop as a smart object. So tick this box and it will always be opened as a smart object. Say OK and your settings have been saved. Now last step that I mostly do is just say open object and I go directly into Photoshop. I do not work too much with these tools here at the top or with all these other adjustments here. I usually tweak my image just a little bit with my curves over here, maybe in highlights a little bit or in darkness. But now for the moment I'm happy with my image and I'm going to open that in Photoshop. So we're going to say open object, and now we're going to directly be taken over to Photoshop. So now we're in Photoshop and our image is still very small over here and we still have bridge in the background. So what I do is press on my image and press F. So now we are all set and we have it at full screen mode and we have our first layer over here. And it is as a smart object. As you guys can see, the small thumbnail down here, this means it is a smart object. So what is this actually giving us? If we double click onto this small icon here, we can then go back into Camera Raw, adjust the image again. Say for instance, if I'm going to pull the recovery all the way up, say OK, and then we're going to go back into Photoshop and directly our image will be overtaken with the new setting from Camera Raw. So now our new adjustment has been overtaken and you can already go on from there. I don't want that, so I'm going to go back into my raw converter. So this smart object field helps you a little bit to go back and forth in your whole Camera Raw. Say OK and we're back into Photoshop.